Now, the focus of this project, as I understand it, grief, and specifically its impact on the human body. What led you down that path?
I think, I mean, obviously there's, been kind of like a collective grieving process, I think, through COVID and the pandemic. And I mean, I think if besides the grief that we've personally experienced, if it, could talk about any grief, it would be like that kind of collective grief that maybe everybody could relate to, of like what we've lost and what we're still like getting used to. And this like idea of having to live with that kind of grief, of living with what the new normal is. And but for me personally, my dad passed away in April 2020, like right at the beginning of COVID. And I mean, that was, yeah, just kind of completely devastating. And
I'm very sorry.
yeah, and I thank you. And so, yeah, I was just holding a lot of grief from that, and it's taken a long time to work through it. And working with Sally on this project has like been a really important part of the healing process for me. And
Have you felt that? Has it been cathartic?
Oh, definitely. Yeah, I mean, before Sally and I worked on this, I hadn't even like touched any of my music stuff for like a year. I had no interest in making sound or music, just like felt very removed from everything.
Nobody really teaches us how to grieve, do they? I've been through it. I lost a parent many years ago, and I didn't know what I was going through. I didn't know how to handle it. Emotions, as intense as they were, surprised me. Even though I knew, obviously, what triggered them, the nature of those emotions was way beyond my capacity to cope with them. Does that sound about right?
Definitely.
Yeah.
Yeah.
How about you, Sally? What interested you in the topic?
I mean, I think there's also there were some personal things I was going through at that time too, that led me to that interest, and definitely that collective process that Briana spoke to with COVID, just kind of this collective loss, was pretty striking. And yeah, maybe it was a combination of that collective feeling, of sort of everyone going through this like grappling with a type of loss. And I guess what interested me was what sort of emerges out of that, like when a certain something is lost, and you truly give yourself the time to grieve that, what what you sort of learn about yourself, and kind of like new parts of yourself that get activated and need to sort of rise to the challenge of like grappling and grieving. And that was something I was definitely feeling just on a personal level with things going on in my life. I'm just really interested also in just how healing works and healing processes, and grief. It's huge, and there can be like specific life events, of course, that like activate that sort of process, but also even just on a more minute level, I guess. There's always aspects of like our past selves that we're sort of letting go of, or saying goodbye to. So that's something just over the last many years that I've been thinking about just in my own healing work, is like leaving space and understanding how to really grieve a part of myself that really isn't part of the mix anymore. And like, what does that mean to really honor that part, but also like let it go and allow it to leave, and see what else can emerge and hold more
Because
space.
the album is not just about grief, right? It's about its impact on us, both emotionally and, interestingly to me, its impact on us physically. What triggered that broader scope than just exploring grief itself?
I think I mean, having made this during like COVID times, before vaccines, during kind of like a lot of still lockdown, like a lot of those feelings of just being stuck inside and like being stuck with your body. And like, what do you do on a day when you're not moving very much? Maybe you're just like in your house, like you're in your room. And I mean, I also have been moving around the country a lot, and just how am I carrying this thing that stays with me? And even if I'm moving from place to place, there's something I'm carrying and it's with me, and it's affecting the way my body feels. Like I feel tired, or I feel achy, I feel like I can't move. I just want to be like laying flat. And I think just thinking about, yeah, like what kind of emotions are carried in different parts of the body. And we try to explore that in the video piece that we made. I'm not sure if you were able to watch that as well, but
Mhm. Talk to me about that. How is the video a presentation of that concept?
Well, I mean, yeah, speaking to what Brianna was just talking about with like the kind of the time of like this lockdown quarantine time, and just being sort of stuck. Me and Brianna were working on different places. Brianna was in New York at that time. I was here in Oakland. Now we're both in Oakland, but we were in separate places. So the way that we were collaborating was a lot of, I mean, it had to be file sharing. So with the video aspect, we both had cameras, and for the most part we were just filming ourselves and filming things around us too. But we were really interested in that idea of self-filming, and what it sort of points to in terms of like witnessing yourself. Because I guess, yeah, part of that grief process, on whatever like level of grief you're working with, even with that big collective one, it's like being an observer and just witnessing what's happening, paying attention to what's happening in your body or your mind too. It's like there's that witnessing aspect. So the camera sort of became, we were interested in exploring that with sort of seeing ourselves through this like act of filming ourselves. So I think that was a big part of what we explored with the video. And also we just captured a lot of like our interior spaces. It's a lot of like us in our bedrooms, sort of like getting a look into alone time, solitary time with our bodies.
It was a very interesting period to follow new sound art and other contemporary music releases over the course of the pandemic. It seemed like a kind of pressure cooker almost, where there was this really extraordinary burst of creativity. I wonder if either of you felt anything positive out of the experience, even if it was just from a productivity perspective.
I think it was pretty stifling for me, but also it's hard because I experienced the death of a parent right at the beginning. And I actually think that very first month of COVID was really exciting, because before my dad died, I was just like, I have all this time now. And like, I remember feeling that surge of energy, but then of course it all came crashing down. But I can imagine what it must have been like for people to have had that like pause without other, conflicting emotional things going on. And just how precious our time is in terms of like being creators and like what we can do with that time. And but I think connecting with Sally on this project, there were still some elements of like having some time and space, even though things were starting to shift already at the time when we started. But
Yeah.
You find the same, Sally?
Yeah, I think it kind of, it definitely was stifling in certain ways, but also sort of clarified things. Yeah, I don't know. I think, I mean, if anything, I think that this piece is a really good reflection of what that time was for me. Like, it made me go so inward, like, in kind of a pretty intense way. Um, yeah, I mean, my like personal main big like other emotional aspect was like I was dealing with a breakup like right at the beginning of the pandemic, really different type of grief. But yeah, it's like talking to friends too and people's different experiences, it's like whatever point you were in your life, whatever was going on emotionally, kind of just like then fell in line or had this then like a relationship with like the lockdown, quarantine, everything. Um, so I guess it just wherever you were at in that moment, you then just had to like kind of plunge down and just be with yourself, which I think in some ways was pretty hard, a little consuming. So it didn't leave as much space maybe for creative work. Also, I guess I realized how dependent I am on community and like being inspired by the people around me and like going out to shows and having performance opportunities to like drive me to create. I realized that was huge. So, but then at the same time, that inward focus helped clarify just things I'm interested in exploring and expressing in creative work. So I think it's a both and, but definitely with Brianna, like having this very intentional collaborative space we entered was kind of a turning point for me too. It like brought me out of that those depths a little bit, and we were able to share a little bit like more in terms of, yeah, we were both in these pretty intense like solitary places, but we were able to have a shared space.
So this was a good project for you, a good experience for you both, really at an important time.
Yeah, it
Yeah.
was pretty, I feel like pretty crucial in my coming back to my art practice,
Oh,
actually.
nice to hear.
Yeah.
The album, I guess roughly speaking, falls into two sections. You got the first pieces, a lot of spoken word, and then this extraordinary 18-something minute piece at the end that I just adore. I have to tell you, it is just stunning to me.
Oh, thank you.
But
So much.
can you tell me a little bit about that thinking? Is it explicitly meant to be sort of two halves of a whole, or did it just kind of flow that way for you?
So that last track is a live Zoom recording of us playing together from across the country and somehow managing to really, yeah, feel off each other. When I listen back to that, I like forget that we weren't in the same space
Crazy.
and that there was like a latency over Zoom.
I know we had to do the latency.
And yeah, but it was really, yeah, kind of a magical live improvisation we did. And of course we did a couple takes of it and we picked the one we liked best, but it's like unedited 16 minutes.
16, okay, yeah.
I think.
Wonderful.
It's also crazy thinking about that time. The other thing me and Brianna like forget sometimes, and then we remember, is like the day that we took to record those performances, because we recorded that performance because Cubit, the residency, like the premiere of the piece, they also wanted, we wanted to like some live aspect. Obviously, yeah, we couldn't do an in-person event, but like some sort of live element, that felt really important. So we were recording this performance to be streamed for that event. But yeah, I think we were like right off the deadline of the piece too. So we had just been like pouring a lot of energy into the piece, and we were both feeling like, wow, like this is a push to get this performance out. And I remember we didn't really feel like too great about it. We weren't sure. And then we
Oh
listened
my
back and
goodness.
we're like, oh wow, something happened. And
Yeah,
yeah.
I'm curious, what did it feel like in real time? Did you have a sense that this is working? Did it feel tense? Did it feel exciting? What was the actual recording process like?
I think there was some, yeah, nervous energy, or I guess that kind of energy that I like, that sort of anxiety of, fuck, is this gonna work out? Is everything just gonna collapse? And I think sometimes I thrive off that energy of like, we only have like a couple hours to get this done. Like it's gotta be something that we're not gonna be embarrassed to show people.
It's funny you say that, Brianna, because I was going to ask you both about for lack of a better term, the bravery that I think it takes to make music of this kind,
Mm,
because it has such um, a relatively small audience. And for those who are not lovers of music like this, it is very, very difficult for them to relate to it. So there is this sense of being part of a very, very small kind of group of people around the world who appreciate this kind of artwork. Bravery, the right word? Do you have a sense of that?
Yeah, I guess bravery or some kind of vulnerability that comes out of, yeah, wanting to share something like this that feels like really raw in some ways, but then also refined and sculpted in other ways because we're both sound nerds and we spend a lot of time like thinking about all the sounds, and we like have had lots of different versions of things and trading things back and forth and really being able to be like, no, I don't like that. And then also lots of filming that we shared that didn't make it into the video too, and just thinking about the things that we were sharing with each other. So I think it becomes this process of like, what are we sharing with each other that we feel brave enough to share? And then
mhm.
from the things that come out of that in like initial bravery and vulnerability with another person, then like letting everyone be witness to that process.
And I
Yeah,
think
it is.
that's the point, right? That live performance is perhaps the most extreme example of this. Sally, what's your feeling about that? Does it take bravery to get up on a stage and do something that only a select few will really appreciate?
Yeah, I think bravery is a good word. Um, I mean, with performance in general, especially, yeah, performance of music that is just going to edge some people out. It's really not going to be their thing. But I think, yeah, with this piece specifically, what Brianna's saying about that, like, that initial bravery of sharing with ourselves feels so important because there was so much vulnerability and just like also with the filming, like neither of us are really that comfortable. Like we'd never made like a full length video piece before, so both of us were really in new territory there. So that required a lot of vulnerability of like, I tried this thing out. Like what do you think? I have no idea if this is working. Um, yeah.
Hmm. I'm curious that artists like yourselves often go through quite a journey before discovering music like this, becoming involved in making music like this. Brianna, we were talking earlier about you being involved in other genres. Sally, I'm sure you have as well. How'd you get here? What was the evolutionary process for each of you to get to a place where you became, as you say, a sound nerd?
I think it just comes with letting go of expectations for me. I think a lot of my like musical upbringing had to do with like wanting to be something maybe that I like looked up to, and like really following people and musicians, artists that I admired, and then having to like slowly like strip back all those expectations and just like, who am I? Like, what do I have to give? Like, if all I have to give is this, like, is that enough? And then I think when I like strip everything back, there's certain things that maybe about pop music, like I have a strong melodic sense, and I think that still finds its way into my work. Like even this piece, like there's some strong melodic aspects to it, but then it's also like has to do with a very like plain spoken emotional like text. And I think when it kind of like gets broken down for me into these like core elements of what's important to work that I love, this is, I don't know, kind of what comes out, like breaking down into these like minimal little things or like minimal sounds, and everything kind of gets like magnified in.
Yeah.
For you, Sally?
Um, yeah, that resonates with Brianna's talking about with like, yeah, initially sort of, well, you're exposed to what you're exposed to musically early on, and so there's like that phase of kind of copying or just sort of even subconsciously sort of following a path of music you like. And so I think, of course, like as you get exposed to more music, then you see more possibilities. I think that was definitely true for me, like just getting exposed to more and more experimental music. Um, yeah, and I think, yeah, I mean, going back to that like bravery piece, it's like, I think there's a certain element of not really thinking about who's listening to it. Like, not forgetting about that, of course, because that part's really important, that exchange and what happens when your work is received. That's like so important. But I think for me, like getting more, like focusing more and more on just, yeah, like getting to that, like the purity of like, what is it that wants to come out, and not trying to fit it into anything I've heard before necessarily, which has taken time because I think early on it's like all you can really do is try to fit it into something you've heard before, and that still happens, you know. But yeah,
Yeah.
I guess just trying to focus the most on just like what shape does this take, and not necessarily worrying about like how outlandish and weird is this, or yeah.
Yeah, you can't allow yourself to be restricted by that.
Yeah, what were you gonna say, Brianna?
Oh, just, yeah, I mean, it's obviously a process. Like we can't help but continuously be influenced by other art and music that we're taking in. But yeah, I like what you said about just, yeah, not paying attention to who is necessarily, and doing it for yourself and doing it for your own like growth and well-being and nourishment. And I don't know, that's what I want my practice to be focused on.
And there's a real attention to detail, almost hyper attention to detail in the work that I've found, um, which, as a listener, just makes each repeated listen more and more appreciated, right? Like there's just so much going on, and it seems to me that each idea that's being presented is being presented with real thought given to it. There's a kind of meticulousness about the work. Does that sound right?
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah.
Did I touch a nerve?
No, I just think it's funny because I always thought I was a really meticulous person. And then I feel like from working with Sally, I'm like, whoa, Sally is like a step beyond me in terms, but like in a good
Me
way.
too much.
No, it's good. I think it's really good because I mean, it just shows like how much you think about it and like your intention and your thoughtfulness. But yeah, it's fun to like be a meticulous person and then like meet your match,